They say that, entrepreneurs are fearless. That's not true.
I'm glad you said that. You passed the bar. You started your own Alex Nahai, who is an attorney, an entrepreneur, and is overseeing 4 multifamily real estate development projects in Los Angeles. And he also just happens to be my brother. What is the first thing they should know?
You need to be comfortable with uncertainty.
Am I probably screwing up in my business right now that I'm unaware of?
I'm trying in this interview right now to give you the most honest answer that I possibly can.
Is it true that you don't learn from your successes, you only learn from your failures?
Placing your hand on a hot stove and getting burned is a pretty good way to learn a lesson. Trusted partners that I shouldn't have trusted, lost large sums of money, spent lots of time, business ideas, that ended up being a waste of time. Have I fired people? Yes. I've fired many people in my career. You have to know when to push them, and you have to know when to put your arm around them.
Your credibility comes from the combination of your genuine care and interest with your meticulous application of knowledge.
Look, I really appreciate those kind words. You might be a little bit biased because you're my brother.
I could say all kinds of bad things about your brother too. Welcome back, everyone, to Nobody Listens to Kevin, a podcast where I share with you the truth about life and relationships that you will not hear anywhere else. And today with me, I have a very special guest, Alex Nahai, who is an attorney, an entrepreneur, and is overseeing 4 multifamily real estate development projects in Los Angeles. And he also just happens to be my brother. So Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to bring you on because I've talked a lot about relationships and I've talked a lot about mental health, but I haven't spoken a lot about business. So this is going to be an interview for some of the entrepreneurs out there who might be interested in learning more about the sort of intersection of their mental health with their professional lives. Just a bit about my guest. Alex went to USC Law School, my alma mater, but not for law school. You passed the bar. You started your own law firm in 2016, where you now have over 300 clients and you have overseen $1.5 billion in transactions. You represent clients in multiple states and countries. You work on intellectual property, real estate, corporate, and entertainment law. In terms of your entrepreneurial journey, you founded a startup in college called Audio Stock Music, which had an offer of acquisition from Microsoft. In 2017, you founded another startup called 420 TV, which had a valuation of $40 million and was eventually sold. And then in 2022, you were voted in as the CEO of BNDR Limited, a technology fund, where you took one of your portfolio companies from $0 to $11 million in revenue in under 6 months. Okay, so an extremely respectable, illustrious career in business and in law. And nothing to, you're an inspiration to me. So let me ask you, if somebody wants to become an entrepreneur, they want to leave their job and go off on their own, what is the first thing they should know?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. The first thing is you need to be comfortable with uncertainty. Which for me is very, very difficult. You will start to see a lot of your friends get nice things. Once they reach their 30s or mid-30s, you might see them starting to buy homes. And you're investing a lot of time and money and effort into a business. You're also not thinking about the opportunity cost of, I'm spending this time. What if it works out? What if it doesn't work out? What if I spend 5 years on this and I find myself 5 years from now, with a failed business, and everybody else that I kind of grew up with or who did stay at that job, they are now kind of further along in their career. Am I going to be able to go back into the corporate environment if this business fails, or will I have been out of it for too long? You need to get comfortable with these concepts because they're going to keep coming up. And they're going to keep coming up when your business feels like it's going to run out of oxygen. They're going to keep coming up when, you're having an argument with your co-founder or whatever whatever the case may be, and it's in any kind of business. So the first thing is to understand that this is not a pathway of certainty. And I know that you talk a lot about mental health, and that can have a significant impact on mental health because every day, you're going to think about that.
So be really good at managing your anxiety,
Well,
or to the extent possible.
yeah, I mean to the greatest extent possible, because you have to try to kind of put your head down and focus as much as you can on what's in front of you. But yeah.
Okay. So if you're having a really difficult day in your personal life, or if you've had a big challenge in your professional life, like
Yeah.
something is not going well in your business, but it's precisely at that moment when you need to show up and perform for your business. How does one separate the personal from the professional? Or is it impossible to compartmentalize? Do you just kind of know, okay, today I'm not going to be performing at my best? Or is there something that you do to, as you said, put your head down and keep diving through the uncertainty?
No, so I can give you an example, from my own career. So when I started my law firm, a lot of it was about like, how do I get clients at the beginning? And at the beginning of any business, when you're starting any business, you're kind of the person that has to like manage these various departments.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are the fulfillment person, you are the salesperson, you are the business development and marketing person, you're the accountant, like
Mm-hmm.
you're doing all of that. And a lot of these skills also maybe they didn't come as naturally to me in the beginning as maybe they do now. And still they don't come as naturally to me as they do other people. But
Yeah, the accounting one does not come naturally to me at all.
yeah, I mean, for me it was sales. Like that was extremely difficult,
Okay.
that like just getting on the phone with people and getting on Zoom with people. And so we would, I would have situations where I would be having a bad day, or, if I had an argument with my girlfriend or whatever the situation was. And the last thing in the world that I wanted to do was get on Zoom with a prospective client
Mm-hmm.
and actually try to kind of take myself out of myself and focus on whatever their need was
Mm-hmm.
at the time, which, I know that you have to do that all day long and it can't be easy. Um, I watched, at some point, I had watched some videos of athletes. A couple times you heard these athletes talking about giving their best performance regardless of what else was going on in their life.
Mm.
And it kind of struck me that these guys are under incredible pressure. They might be in a stadium with tens of thousands of people, and they only have that one opportunity that week, or within the next few days or something, to give their best performance. And that was something that really stayed with me, and something that I really reminded myself of. Like when it hits 9 a.m. or whenever it is that I have that first meeting that I need to talk to that other individual, I have to try to give my very best performance regardless of what's going on, what else is going on in my life. So understanding that these athletes are able to do that, every day, and understanding that the reason that they are paid is not as much because of their physical capacity as because of their mental capacity to deal with that kind of pressure, was something that gave me inspiration. That if I'm having a bad day, or there's something on my mind, or I'm scared about something, if I'm concerned about my health or a family member or my relationships or whatever it is on that particular day, I have to do my very best to compartmentalize,
Mm.
and take care of whatever I need to take care of. And then I can focus on, the reason why my day is bad.
But as an entrepreneur, you're saying that you have to know on some level that you have that capacity. Perhaps it's not for everybody, because if you were going to work at a corporate job and you had an argument with your girlfriend that morning that was really stressing you out, there's not the same level of pressure to show up at your 9 to 5 job as there would be in your position.
I think at certain levels, like for example, if you're the CEO of a public company or something like that, you do have that same pressure.
Mm.
Because, for example, when I was the CEO of the fund, right, we had these meetings. I had a habit of, we had an all company meeting that I called every day at 9 o'clock,
Mm.
so
Every day.
every day from 9 to 10 every day.
Wow.
We were working on a bunch of different projects, and I started to notice that like if too much time passed, I didn't want to have to sit there and micromanage everybody throughout the day because I wanted to focus on whatever I needed to focus on, but I wanted daily updates every day on what had been done before, the day before. Some people thought I was micromanaging. I didn't really care. For me, it was like about results, So yes, we had this meeting every day. And after that, I generally left like people alone. I had a lot of bad days when I was managing that company, not because of the company, but because of other things going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that we had 11 interest rate hikes in 2023.
Oh my God.
I'm a property owner. I had a lot of concerning times, There were a lot of times when I did not want to hold that meeting, and I was holding the meeting. People are like joking and talking in the meeting. I'm having to like tell them to focus. I'm having to go through all the metrics from this department and that department and whatever. But I just kept reminding myself, that there are other people in other professions who are under a lot more pressure than whatever pressure I was under at the time, even though I was under a lot of pressure, but I just kept reminding myself that if they could perform at that level, then I could do this. And I went into work every day with that attitude, and I still do.
Wow. When you're in a leadership position like that, is it more important to be liked or to deliver the results or some combination? Because I assume you as a boss are tough but fair.
That is the way that I was described, by the people who were working for me at the fund that I was at, and it's the way that my current employees describe me as well.
That was a lucky guess from just being your younger brother.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, as for being liked, okay, it's very important to. I don't want to use the word reward because I don't want to act like I'm setting up like a parent-child like relationship, because that's not the way that I view.
But incentivize
the people who work with me. But it's very important that you recognize the contributions of the people that are working for you and working with you. So, my employees today, I'll give you an example. Like one of my employees said, and he is a key employee in my firm. Okay. And he wrote to me and he said, my grandmother passed away. Can I have Monday off? And I said, yeah, of course, take Monday off. And he came back on Tuesday and he was at full capacity on Tuesday. So I gave him a bonus, because not because he took the day off, but because he was at full capacity a day later. To me, having lost family members before, it can be very difficult to be at a full capacity, a day later. But that's one thing about, it's not about being liked, but I remember when I was working for other people, especially in entertainment, it can be a very thankless kind of environment. And it's very easy to like lose the motivation to keep contributing and giving your best if you feel that it's not recognized. And it's also very difficult to feel that you are a part of something if your contributions are not recognized. So that's the first thing that I would say is when you're in a leadership position, and I'll get to the rest of it in a sec, but when you're in a leadership position, it's very, very important to make the people who are working for you feel recognized. This is the first thing. The second thing is the people that are working for you should never feel like you are asking them to do something that you would not do yourself. Okay. Yes, there have been people who have worked for me that have been more talented at their skill than I am at their skill. Okay. But they at least know, like, I'll give you another example. Okay. I was in a situation when I was running the fund, we had a marketing thing that we couldn't figure out. I spent $20,000 on a marketing course. We already had a very, very skilled marketing person working for us. I took this course because I wanted to be able to speak the same language with him enough, even though I'd had enough of a marketing background, but I felt like I needed to kind of get my skills, in a better place. So I invested in order to be able to have enough of a conversation with him to where he would understand that, I knew what I was talking about enough, and that I was willing to like get in the boat and contribute with him enough and have more of a collaborative partnership really with
Mm.
him, even though he was working for me. So, so that's another thing is, you don't want your employees to almost like look down on you in a way. I have also been in situations where I was working under people. I was doing a job that I felt like they didn't have any idea like what I was working on or anything like that. And that's pretty demotivating,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So that's another thing. And then I think that if you do those two things that I just mentioned, if you recognize the contributions of others, and if people feel that you are not asking them to do something that you would not roll up your sleeves and do yourself,
Mm-hmm.
then you can focus on results, and then you can expect a very high degree of performance from them. Have I fired people? Yes. I've fired many people in my career, but the people that who've kind of, the people that are still continuing to work for me, and whose contributions I do recognize, they see that I'm making a real effort every day, to drive results, and that they see the work ethic that I have. When you see that work ethic from the person who's in a leadership position, I think you respect that.
Of course.
So
I remember when I was in college, I was working in this restaurant, and there would be Sunday brunch was always the shift that everybody was dreading, because there were like 300 customers waiting at the door, and it was just nonstop the entire time. And brunch is kind of messy. There's eggs and ketchup and potatoes flying everywhere, and people are hungry and people are hungover from the night before. There was the manager who, when all of the servers were knee deep in shit, was upstairs doing accounting and paperwork.
yeah,
And then there was the manager who was downstairs running dishes, bussing tables, taking orders. And that was always the manager that latter example was always the person I wished was on my shift.
right.
He was doing something that he was willing to do himself, the things that were required of his employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just human nature. I mean, when you feel a real disconnect from whoever's in a leadership position, it's difficult. Like I worked for Ari Emanuel.
Mm. At Endeavor?
Yeah.
Uh,
Like he could be really tough. I remember there was some super agents in a meeting one day. They were super successful. They themselves had a huge client roster and tons of money and stuff. And I just remember a couple of them were like talking during the meeting, and he was like, "Hey, no talking during the meeting." And you could tell they were like a little embarrassed in front of a bunch of other super agents and super successful people. But he was also the guy who, like, he had a connection with a lot of the people who worked for him. He like remembered your name, you know, he would shake your hand, he would ask you what you were like. You wouldn't be in an elevator next to him and he would just act like you were nothing. Like,
right.
he was not that guy, So
He was tough, but at the end of the day, you knew he cared.
yeah. Or another great example was Charlie Collier at Fox. He's now the head of Hulu.
Oh, wow.
His first year's compensation was a compensation package of $50 million.
Oh,
Okay. And we had a Zoom at Fox. I was being onboarded, and it was a small Zoom, but it was like kind of like a leadership group. And I mean, he's, miles and miles and miles ahead in his career, compared to where I am. But I remember he sent me, it was during COVID, I think. Yeah, he sent me a message directly on Zoom, and he was like, "Alex, like, welcome, nice to have you here, this and that." Just the fact that he did that,
mm.
it meant so much to me. And I now, I think very fondly of people like that,
Wow.
So, look, I was talking about Ari Emanuel and how, he has a connection with everybody. He was also tough. I mean, there's a very famous story about the way, Endeavor was started.
Mm.
That they took files from another agency that probably weren't authorized to take. So he had that side of him too.
Got it.
Um,
It's a little bit of the street smarts combined in there. You have, if you're going into an industry or starting a business where 99% of people fail, you have to have internal grit.
100%. You have to have internal grit. You have to understand people. You have to know when to push them, and you have to know when to put your arm around them. And
It's a great way to put it.
yeah.
So in my business, I only know how to do one thing, and pretty much in my life too. I'm good with people. I'm good with communication. I understand people's emotions. You understand real estate, marketing, sales, entrepreneurship, technology, the law, multiple facets of the law. So is it more important to be a master of one thing, or to diversify your skill set and therefore your streams of revenue? I'm not saying that what I do is correct. I'm asking you for advice here, because you've dipped your hands into so many different cookie jars, and I'm sure you've had failures, but you've also been very successful in them. So how would you advise a person like me who only really is good at one thing?
I think that it is common because it's common to get views by being polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A lot of these like debates kind of come up about, is it better to be a specialist or is it better to be a generalist, or like that's a big one. Then there are more kind of entertaining ones, like who's better at basketball, like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, and it's more entertaining. But to your point, I think that there is a lot of like polarization out there these days because it drives views. My answer to your question is there is not necessarily a better way. And that whatever is your way, you can find a way to be successful with that. Like there are a lot of people out there who say that it's not good to be an employee, and that the only way that you'll make real money as an entrepreneur is that really true? Like there are W-2 employees who are the CEOs of public companies who are making tons of money. I mean, like Max Lusada, he's the president of recorded music for Warner. He cashed in his shares for like $33 million.
Wow.
He's an employee, and he's still working there. So I don't think that there's any particular thing that's better or worse. If you are the type of person whose mind thinks in terms of, I have this one skill and I want to hone this skill to the best of my ability, then that's great. And on the other hand, if you're somebody whose mind works a little bit differently, basically the way my mind works is, I want to understand enough about various topics so that I can run a business and be able to oversee various topics and speak knowledgeably about various topics. But everybody is different. I mean, I don't think that it would make sense to tell Michael Jordan, for example, who was probably the best there ever was at one particular skill, that his way is not as good as somebody who's good at a bunch of.
Well, someone did try that, and he went and became a baseball player.
Who's that?
No, Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
someone told him, maybe you should diversify.
Oh, is that true? Is that why?
No, I'm just joking.
Oh.
Yeah, but no, that's very helpful. It's more about the person you are and the way that your mind works.
Yeah.
But there are multiple paths to becoming successful.
Yeah, of course.
How have your failures in your business shaped your trajectory, and how did you handle them emotionally?
More failures than successes, for sure. It's not easy. How did I handle them emotionally? Okay, I'll put it like this. As I sit here today with this vantage point, with the knowledge that I have about business and about finance, I'm very grateful for the failures that I had. I learned some very, very painful lessons. But I would also say that, I would definitely not be at this point right now without the failures. Sometimes you see people and they reach success very early in life. And it's very possible to have success and then kind of lose that success because you haven't learned those lessons. That's not a cliche. I mean, that is true. Sometimes you see people who reach success early in life and, you know, they kind of are able to sustain that success. So you have those examples too. But I can say that what is true is that without the failures from the past, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have today, and I just wouldn't have the acumen that I have today because it's much easier to learn something, once you've had a failure.
Is it true that you don't learn from your successes? You only learn from your failures, or have your successes also shaped your trajectory?
I think you can learn from both. I do, but I think that, placing your hand on a hot stove and
Mm.
getting burned is a pretty good way to learn a lesson. Um, I think I've learned more from the failures than I've learned from the successes, for sure.
When you said you've learned some pretty painful lessons,
Hmm.
was that in terms of people you trusted? Was it in terms of losing a large sum of money? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I mean, those are both examples.
Okay.
Um, I've trusted partners that I shouldn't have trusted. I mean, everybody has had that experience, or most people have in business anyway. Um, I've lost large sums of money for sure. Um, I have spent lots of time on business ideas, uh, that ended up being a waste of time. Um, I've been arrogant, early on in my career, like
Mm.
that offer from Microsoft, we should have taken it.
Mm.
Um, so I've learned all of these different things. Okay, the most frustrating part of the successes the failures for me, I think, is so I just like will look back on some of them and I'll be like, oh man, like if I had known then what I know now, I
You'd
wouldn't
be
have
a
made that
superstar.
mistake, but I have a client, he's very, very successful guy, and I was kind of having that conversation with him and I was a little bit down on myself and he said, look, you can't get down on yourself because at the time you were doing your very best, with the knowledge that you had at the time.
Mhm.
So everybody everybody has their own trajectory and their own pathway, and I compare myself to people all the time and I get really down on myself, like why did that person's business succeed and this thing that I started didn't succeed or whatever. um but but at the same time, I'm also grateful for the failures that I have because it's now put me in a position to have more success next time.
What do you build your confidence on, both in your life and in your business, your personal and professional life? Is it your competence, being good at something? Is it resilience through these failures you've experienced? How do you have the trust and belief in yourself, both personally and professionally?
First of all, I don't want to act like somebody who feels confident all the time and who doesn't have fear, when it comes to business. I have fear all the time.
Mm.
Um, I think some healthy fear is important, but I too am working on, having less fear. Okay. They say that, entrepreneurs are fearless, and like, that's not true.
Mm.
I can tell you right now,
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, I can tell you right now that like fear of self-sabotage or doubt, self-doubt or whatever is a daily battle for me. So that's one thing. But as far as where do I get my confidence from, I would say if I have a task that's in front of me, if I'm challenging myself to be better at something, or particularly if it's a skill that I'm not as not as good at, I will just take solace in the fact that the one thing that I can control is how hard I work at learning what I need to learn
Mm.
to become better at whatever that is. Um, so just applying myself, just putting in the hours, I think, toward just learning, um, I think is something that gives me more confidence.
So even if the result doesn't end up exactly how you wanted, knowing that you have acquired a new skill or you've applied yourself as with as much focus as you could, makes you feel at peace?
It makes me feel more ready to go out and try that thing,
Ah,
and that thing could be starting a new business, or it could be starting a new initiative within my current business, or it could be scaling a department within my business, or something like that.
mm-hmm.
For me, it's just about, okay, the one thing that I can control is if I can get access to learning something, and if I can put in the hours to learn what I need to learn in order to accomplish my goal, um, I will be able to take some confidence in that,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately the result is very difficult to control. You just really don't know whether how the market is going to respond, um, to whatever you're trying to do.
I've read a lot of books on these subjects that you've been sharing your insight on.
Mm-hmm.
One of the pieces of insight that I've read is that the difference between a successful entrepreneur, however you would define successful, and somebody who struggles a lot is their decisiveness or their ability to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you smile?
Yeah, because I've read that too.
Is that BS?
I think it's BS.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm glad I brought it up.
I think it's BS. Um, I think that it is important to know when to make that decision.
Mm.
It's important to know when to pull the trigger. That is true. And I am struggling with becoming better at figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I've met a lot of people who have lived by that mantra and who just like start something and they have business failures.
Mm-hmm.
I also know a lot of people who have business successes who are very thoughtful and very measured, and they wait for the right time, So again, I really don't think that you can pin success or failure down to one particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are times to be decisive and there are times to be measured and thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think knowing the difference is probably a factor in success. Knowing what is the difference, what is the right time. Okay. And so I would say it would be more of that. It's more of knowing, is it the right time for me to do this? Am I prepared enough? Is my team prepared enough? And if the answer is yes, and it's the right opportunity, and it's the right time, and you have product market fit, whatever, yeah, then take a risk. But I think people who just I know a lot of people who make decisions for the sake of making them, and I don't think that's a good idea.
There's a great channel on YouTube called Veritasium, where the guy who runs this channel was uncovering these social, scientific, and psychological studies where they interviewed super successful people and they asked them, what role do you think luck or timing or opportunity or the universe played in your success?
Yeah.
And they all significantly overrated their own contribution to their success. And they all significantly overrated how many elements were in their control. And it turns out, at least as far as these studies show, that becoming successful involves so many factors that are not in your control.
Yeah.
And when we have reached a pinnacle, we give ourselves a lot more credit than actually is the case. Having said that, I think that the right balance is to work as if everything is in your control and try to pretend that you can turn over every stone yourself, but then you let the chips fall where they may, and you accept the outcome.
I would respond to that in a few ways. One way I would respond to it is somebody may give a certain answer on a YouTube channel when they're being interviewed, and then when they're kind of by themselves, with themselves, the answer may be different.
It's a great point.
I'm trying in this interview right now to give you the most, honest answer that I possibly can.
Thank you.
The most, but I think that's that's one factor. I would say the other factor is uh, there was a time when I was really not successful at all, and I was going through a lot of difficult times, and to say the least. And I would say that during those times, I was always blaming something external.
Mm.
I don't know like what came first, the chicken or the egg. I don't know whether I started to become more successful and then I started to take more accountability, or if it was starting to take more accountability first. But I can say now that one feature of successful people is they take accountability for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if something goes wrong, it may not be their fault, but they're going to take accountability for it. And if something goes right, they'll probably find a way to take accountability for it too.
Right.
So I think when you're interviewing somebody like that and you're asking them about the successes that their company has had, they're going to take accountability for them. Mm-hmm. If you say, well, why did your stock price, drop by 20% or whatever, I think most of those people would probably also focus on what was their role in that. Now, maybe it's true that there were limitations to what their successes, to their contribution in their successes and in their failures. But I think, successful people tend to be all about taking that accountability. That can be a difficult position too, because you can blame yourself a lot and criticize yourself a lot for things that were kind of outside of your control. Mm-hmm. And I do that for sure, but I'd rather do that than start putting myself putting myself back in the place of like, I'm going to blame external factors.
Mm-hmm. And shameless plug for healthy relationships and healthy, strong mental health. The fastest way to improve your mental health and your relationship is to look at the extent of personal accountability you are willing to take.
Makes sense.
What have you learned about mental health and about business that you did not know 5 years ago?
Oh man, that's a difficult question. That's a great question. I would say, well, actually, it was something you actually taught me. Yeah, we went to Marmalade Cafe in 2018 or 2019.
Wow.
And I was going through a very difficult time. I was probably going through the worst time in my life.
My God.
And I wanted to start talking to other people who had been through difficult things, even though I'd been through a lot of difficult things up until that point. I just had the feeling that difficult things kept happening to me. And I was like, why does my life just feel like this collection of hard times? And so, you were one of the people that I wanted to ask about. So I asked you about your colitis and how was it that, even though you've had colitis, you've been able to kind of live a fulfilled life. And you said to me, you told me about this one time you went to the doctor and he delivered some bad news and you were inconsolable. And then you told me that the colitis that you have is not something that is in alignment with your purpose. And we talked a lot about the fact that in your life, having a purpose has been something that has enabled you to sort of have fulfillment in your life, even in the presence of difficult things. So for me, once I had that conversation with you, I started going more and more into the exploration of business, different types of business models, different investments, different skills. And that kind of became a purpose for me. And so that's been a something that's really contributed to my mental health, has been developing that purpose. And that was not something that I knew 5 years ago. I just didn't, until you said that, I didn't really understand how, my career and my mental health could be connected. So I would say, finding that purpose, finding something that you're passionate about and going all in, is something that's important. And then the other thing that I would say is something about business that I learned and how it applied to my mental health was this Pareto principle, which is that you get 80% of the results from 20% of the effort.
What's Pareto? P-A-R-E-D-O?
ETO. Yeah.
P-A-R-E-T-O for
Yeah.
people who want to look it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this principle basically states that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts, but it's the 20% of your efforts that are the most meaningful that will provide 80% of the results. So I learned this.
But you don't know what 20% is going to produce the 80%.
Well, you need to take inventory, and you need to see, like, for example, if we're just talking purely financially, right? You need to, well, where is 80% of my money coming from?
Ah.
Right? And then you learn to, like, get rid of the fluff and just, like, whatever was the 20% that was driving most of your results, you focus on this more and more. So that was a business principle that I learned. I don't know if it's true 100% of the time, but I have been in situations where I've been able to verify that something like that is true. So then I looked at my own life and I was like, where am I getting most fulfillment out of my life? And it was, my career, my close relationships, my best friend, my girlfriend, my family, my health, was another one. And, I really just kind of decided to focus 90% of my time on those particular things. And that really improved my mental health as well. Like, once I cut out a lot of the other stuff, that was what worked for me.
Amazing.
Everybody has obviously different things that helps them. But for me, it was all about simplifying and prioritizing as much as possible.
Amazing. I love that. And thank you for sharing that story with me. I remember when we had that lunch, and you've taught me countless lessons that I'm always grateful to you for. What am I probably screwing up in my business right now that I'm unaware of?
Well, it's difficult for me to answer the question because I don't know enough about your business. I mean, it seems to go very well, but
well, I guess maybe I should rephrase the question. For somebody who is young and they are running a small business, let's say a service-based business, because product is a totally different thing, right? Let's say you're a young lawyer or a young doctor or somebody who's working for themselves. What are you probably not aware of that could be eating up your profit or your time?
Time and profit are two very different things.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But it's very difficult to answer the question. I mean, it would be different advice to lawyers, and doctors would get different advice, and therapists would get different advice because the business models are totally different. I mean, you're a therapist, so, like, your business depends on human capital. It depends on personal interaction. The way that you would grow your business is going to be very different from the way an attorney would grow his or her business, or the way somebody who does HVAC would grow their business, or the way a doctor, like,
because it depends on the market.
Yeah, it depends on the market. It depends on the kind of customer or the kind of client, and it depends on the nature of the business. Like the product that you are delivering is very different from the product that Cody is delivering. So
shout out to Cody, our audio video guy.
Yeah, producer Cody. So it's I wish that it was easy enough to kind of just simplify it down to a soundbite, but
no, I'm glad you're saying that because it makes me question a lot of the sound bites that I hear from business gurus all day long.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've read probably 10, 15 books on these subjects about entrepreneurship and mental health and growing your business and scaling your business. And, every one of them has a different angle. But I think what you're saying is it's probably the combination of so many of these different factors rather than, taking one angle and really running with that.
Yeah. And, like, for example, the thing about those books, some of them can be very helpful, but a lot of them are very surface level. And, when it comes down to, Well, I can give you one idea,
Sure.
but when it and we have had this conversation before, but when it comes down to your particular business, the advice that you get in a book, which is written more generally about business or entrepreneurship, it's probably not going to apply like 100% to your business. There may be some principles that, you know, but I think for your particular business, and you have done this over the years, which is when you first started your life coaching business, I think you were more general,
Hmm.
and I think now you've found that relationships is something where you have a significant um it's a niche for you, and so I think niching down that way is probably pretty important,
Hmm.
especially these days, because you know people are just bombarded with different kinds of things, and so it's like if you need a good relationship therapist, you go to Kevin for
Hmm.
that. um so I would say that is probably pretty important, and in the early days it's difficult to do that because you're just starting your business, and you'll like take business wherever you can find it.
Yes.
um but once you get to the point where you have enough income coming in that you can really afford to like develop a niche or test out a niche or something like that, uh, I think that's probably something to strive for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You have famously said, this has become a quote among my friends and
Oh
some
no.
some circles that I have. No, I always say, well, Alex Nahai says, in California you can sue a fucking turkey sandwich.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Excuse my language. So everybody here all the time needs a lawyer for a million different things. If I'm hiring a lawyer, what should I look for?
Well, the first thing to know is there's 1.3 million lawyers in the United States.
Wow.
There's one lawyer for every 300 people
Damn.
in the United States. Um, and I had no idea there were that many lawyers
Hmm.
until a couple years ago, but yes, that is true. Um,
Can I tell you why I'm asking you this?
yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, because there are a lot of bad life coaches out there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of bad psychiatrists. There are a lot of bad
There are a lot
therapists.
of bad lawyers out there too.
Well, so if somebody asked me, hey, I want to hire, somebody with my mental health or my relationships or whatever, what should I do when I'm interviewing them? I would tell them, I think these are, three or four things that you want to make sure are there.
Okay. Well, first, I think it's important to see if this is somebody who's really thoughtful, and who's approaching your particular circumstance thoughtfully. If I were hiring a lawyer, and what I try to do with like all of our prospective clients is I try to think through that issue with them, like just on the first consultation, just
Mm.
on the first call. You know, I try to show them that I have some skin in the game. Here I'm spending my time. I'm giving you some of my time for free here, uh, to help you work through this issue, and to to kind of, you know, show you that I'm invested in solving your particular issue. So this is one thing I think when it comes to hiring an attorney. I think also you want an attorney that is very meticulous.
Mm.
So I think it's important to try to understand that this is someone who is thinking through the various issues, who is, you know, uh, who's taking it seriously and paying attention to the details. I think that's also very important when it comes to an attorney. A lawyer will show you that if they're that kind of person. You
Mm.
know, if they're the kind of person who's just like, yeah, sure, we have a lot of cases, just like pay me and we'll take care of it for you. It's probably not, you know, there are a lot of very successful lawyers out there who are like that, but if I were hiring an attorney, um, I would want somebody who is kind of going to show me from that first call,
Mm.
that they are willing to look at my issue with its unique um, features and characteristics, and think through the various details. I would also say an attorney who is not afraid to tell you if they disagree with you is an important feature.
Mm.
Because if you have a lawyer that's a yes man and or yes woman and saying yes to everything, they're probably just sick and tired of you,
Mm.
telling them what to do. and they're not giving you their best advice.
Mm.
So you should invite disagreement from the attorney if the attorney disagrees, and that attorney should not be afraid to disagree with you.
Mm.
It really has to be like a partnership where it's got to be like, the client and the lawyer are like partners and they're figuring out this issue together. And the reason for that is that you as the client, your business or your life or your particular circumstances better than anybody else. And the attorney knows the law. So, the two of you are like partners, trying to move forward and figure out this puzzle together, whether the puzzle is working on how to best structure a deal or working how to plan for a litigation or whatever that is. So I think those are important features when you're deciding who to hire as an attorney.
It seems like both in your life personally and in your career professionally, your credibility comes from the combination of your genuine care and interest with your meticulous application of knowledge. I'm kind of picking up that those are, that those are two parts of your code. Mm-hmm. You're really honest, you're very transparent, you're very forthcoming and genuine and authentic in what you do and what you say. And at the same time, you also really go in and make sure that all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Look, I really appreciate those kind words. You know me better than most people. So, I appreciate you saying that. You might be a little bit biased because you're my brother,
I could say all kinds of bad things as your brother too.
But look, I do think that it's true. I have a bit of an obsessive personality. I can tell you one story about something that happened with a client of mine, and maybe this will be helpful. So
sure.
I have a client who is a very, very dear friend of mine now and somebody that I respect tremendously. And he's such a good guy, if he's watching this, I'm not going to say who it is, but when he first came to me, he had a co-founder dispute and his co-founders were trying to push him out of the company. And he basically told me that he had signed the documents, the partnership agreement, essentially. I don't want to give too many details, but without consulting an attorney, let's say. And he was told later, after the company had raised a lot of money, that the other two co-founders just wanted him out and he didn't have any leverage. So he came to me, and upon reviewing the documents, and we had a 30-minute consultation, and I was trying to review them like on a screen share over Zoom. I was in Miami, but it seemed very much like he didn't have any leverage. And there were a lot of documents, and he was it was a situation where he also kind of had resigned himself to the fact that he wasn't going to get anything out of this. So he just wanted like a quick consultation. He wasn't planning to like retain me or pay for legal services or anything like that. I went to sleep that night, and in the middle of the night, he was actually going to just he was just kind of going to leave the company and go away. And in the middle of the night, it occurred to me that there may be a document that he had not sent to me that might have changed the situation. It was like 4:00 in the morning. And so I texted him a bunch of times and I called him at like 7 a.m., and I told him like, don't do it. Like, don't walk away. Like, don't sign that thing they want you to sign. Like, send me this document instead. And let me see if there's something in there. And this was a year ago. And it turned out that there was like one very short phrase in one of these documents that could have been interpreted in such a way that would actually give him tremendous leverage in the situation. So he ended up retaining my firm, and we got him a very large settlement out of that situation. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And so that was a situation where like in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about this guy's situation. And I, it ended up like having a happy ending for him. But yeah, I mean, the details and the attention to the detail and that the obsessive personality and everything that is true about me. Um, and so, I think being able to harness that into your work and into what you do is, it can be a good thing as long as you know when to switch it off,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, of course. That obviously has a downside, but that's an attorney who will go to bat for you.
Thanks. Okay, so
If people want to hire you, retain your services, consult you about real estate, entrepreneurship, legal issues, where can they find you?
yeah, if anybody just wants to have a conversation, they can find me on Instagram. I'm at Alex Nahai, LinkedIn, Alex Nahai. Um, and yeah, I'm just always happy to have these conversations about business and career and work or whatever.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I will make sure that the links to your info are in the description. And I want to thank you for all of the knowledge and wisdom and honesty and truth that you've imparted today. It's been incredible talking to you.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's great.
Good. Thank you.
And thank you, Cody.